Hi, everyone. Welcome to Korean Help's Mental Health Awareness and Wellness Podcast. In this podcast, we interview various figures of the Asian community in order to bring attention to the importance of mental health, as it is a topic that many people of the Asian community overlook. We aim to encourage listeners to practice self-reflection and care in order to help them live a healthy life. For more information about the initiative behind this podcast, mental health resources, and other medical services, please visit koreanhelp.org. To start off with introductions, my name is Hannah, and I'm a current junior attending Stuyvesant High School.
I'm Eric. I'm an undergraduate student at Emory University.
I'm Yunjin. I'm the only one that's not a student. I work in event management.
I'm Daniel, and I'm an undergrad student at Vanderbilt University.
I'm Faith, and I'm a junior in Long Island.
Hi, I'm Chloe, and I'm also a junior in high school.
Our first guest for our podcast is Principal Seung of Stuyvesant High School. Principal Yu has worked in youth development for many years, serving as the executive director of the state education in Washington, D.C., and eventually holding several roles in the NYC DOE. He currently serves as the principal of Stuyvesant High School and the adjunct assistant professor for the Summer Principals Academy at Columbia University. Welcome, Principal Yu, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, to start off our conversation, we wanted to ask about your personal background and experience that has led to your current career. So I'll hand it off to Daniel to begin.
Hello, Principal Yu. First off, I just wanted to ask, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a nice midwinter recess in preparation for the remainder of the school year. But it's been really nice. Cold, but
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Recently, I mean, I'm currently in Nashville. There's been a lot of snow here, so
Yeah.
it's must have been pretty nice. I have a couple of questions about like your general background in history.
Sure.
So since you're a principal of a high school of STY, that is, I just wanted to know what kind of like life you had in high school and college, and like what was your like main field of study, like your major?
Sure. So I actually grew up in North Carolina, and lived and grew up in a city called High Point, which is right near Winston-Salem and Greensboro. It's an up-and-coming area where it's actually grown quite a bit in the last few years. And went to a high school called T. Wingate Andrews, and I was really fortunate. Hopefully, like many students, I really enjoyed and loved my high school experience. I know that's maybe not the experience for everyone, but for me, it was really influential, and I think it was a springboard for everything that I've been able to accomplish. Um, I have three older sisters, two of which went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, so I end up going there. And I think one of the things that was really unique about my experience is I felt like I was a big fish in a small pond in high school, and then going to University of North Carolina. I think at the time they had about 24,000, which included the grad programs, and I quickly realized I was a very small fish in a very big pond, um, and really had some growing pains. Didn't really know what I wanted to major in. I actually went through a variety of majors, from pharmacy to business to economics to eventually English literature, and I think the college experience was really important for me as well, just to learn a lot more about myself. Um, and then fortunately, right after college, I ended up going to the Peace Corps, and served for 2 years in the Dominican Republic. And then afterwards moved to Washington, D.C., which I worked for about 8 years, progressively moving up in my career. And then eventually I headed up to New York City for graduate school at Teachers College Columbia. So that's really kind of been the trajectory. And when I got to New York City, began my teaching career, and then continued to acquire more education from my master's all the way to my doctorate. And so I feel very lucky that what started in high school eventually led me back into schools, and fortunate to be the principal at Stuyvesant High School.
That's very interesting to hear. I mean, like obviously my peers and me myself, we have like a very tough time like finding what we need to do in life, and like especially because more specifically I'm currently majoring in music education.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's really nice to hear about your like the current pathways on what you have gone through in your life. So, I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like, can you give us a more detailed like rundown of like how your career path led to you being the principal at Stuyvesant?
Sure. As I mentioned before, I really loved my high school experience. I had some incredible teachers and coaches who I think just really believed in me. I was one of two Asians in my high school, so that was really unique. And growing up, I was trying to figure out my identity. And fortunately, during high school, I just had so many adults, and including my family and my parents, who were just uh, had just a lot of belief in me. And over the course of my time during college and even my work experience, I think I eventually knew that I wanted to work with young people. I think I wanted to coach. I played a lot of sports growing up, and then in high school played quite a bit. And I think after having my career in Washington D.C., um, I had some personal things happen with my own family. My dad was diagnosed with cancer, and it really just kind of struck me as that needed to make the most of my time, and which is when I applied for grad school, and really was kind of the definitive point for me to know that I wanted to go work with young people, wanted to coach, wanted to teach, and so was fortunate that they had a program through Teachers College, and then which led me to that trajectory. But something that was really important that hadn't really often shared. I was initially declined at Teachers College when I first applied, and I was fortunate again where um, when I was applying for the program, I was also applying simultaneously for a scholarship through the Teachers College Peace Corps program. And I recall, when I was going through it, I did really well in the interview for the scholarship, and they really liked me. But Teachers College, I think at the time, didn't think my academic, you know, uh, profile, particularly during undergrad, wasn't sufficient, or didn't think that I guess would do okay in grad school. And I was really fortunate that I had someone advocate for me, and literally like within 24 hours, I revamped my application, and because I had some folks advocate for me, I got accepted to the program. Um, and I share that because I think everyone thinks there's this kind of linear trajectory. You go from point A to point B to point C, and oftentimes there are a lot of things that kind of cross your path. And I was really fortunate that someone advocated, and then I got in, and at that point, I made sure that I took advantage of every opportunity. So I think in one way, I'm surprised being the Stuyvesant principal, but at the same time, I'm not. I remember when I was teaching and eventually became a first time principal. It's like I could see myself at Stuyvesant, and so I was really fortunate and an honor to be the principal, particularly um, since I always felt that there could be that possibility.
Yeah, that sounds really great. I think Sty is very honored to have you as well. And kind of
Yeah.
transitioning into more personal topics, and as a STI student, I wanted to know more about the way that you view mental health, specifically in STI. And to start off, I know that teachers of STI are known to have very high expectations for their students and often very
Sure.
heavy workloads. But at the same time, STI does have a lot of emphasis on mental health and kind of taking care of yourself. Like sometimes we have organization days and a lot of school-wide events. These two contradictory ideas of maintaining your GPA and working hard, but also at the same time taking care of your mental health. How do you think that students can try to balance this dynamic and live a healthy lifestyle while attending STI?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I'm probably going to get a very imperfect answer. You know, I think young people have it really difficult. When I think about my high school career, and you know, I'm sure I found it difficult at the time, but looking at you all and what you experience, I mean, it's a really changing world. I think the expectations of our young people, I think the demands, I think the access to so much information and so many distractions is really difficult. Um, yet at the same time too, I think, there's been lots of questions about maintaining high expectations. How do you help young people continue to grow and you know get through some difficult times while also trying to you know um, maintain that balance. And to be honest, I think it's really hard. I don't know if finding the balance, um not saying that's not possible, but it's really difficult. And I think we've tried to find ways to help young people. We've tried to find ways to have these conversations and not make it an either or. Like you're either going to have to work, to the point of, it's going to break you, or you're going to, take it easy. I think we're constantly struggling with that. I think adults struggle with that. We talk about the young people, but I think young people expect the adults to be able to help them, but many adults struggle with it. Where I stand right now at this point, and I think I've tried to message this, like we want to push young people. There's a reason why you were and in this case, and even Eric, you made it to Stuyvesant is a difficult place. It was intended to be difficult. There's high expectations, high demands, um, and our job is to find ways not to break you by any means, but to challenge you in a way that's going to prepare you for life. And when I think about it now, about what you're already experiencing, and then when you leave us, it's just going to continue to be even more challenging. And I think um, we want to help young people find joy, find ways to enjoy high school while also working extremely hard, because we do think it's really meaningful. And so, I think the way that we try to encourage balance is you got to work hard in your academics, but there are so many other aspects of life, like your extracurriculars, clubs, social events, um, and finding ways to decompress, right? Besides scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is finding other kind of vehicles to express yourself, to find joy, to find relationships. And so I think this is part of our mission statement, is to create well-rounded young people. And I think that really is the key to finding some semblance of balance, because I think everyone needs to find different outlets, um, to find joy, to find to be to decompress from the world. And this was something that was said at the very beginning: time to reflect. I think those are really important opportunities, to think about what's going on in your own life and think what's going on around the world. But I continue to struggle with this as a principal and even as a father, of you know not applying so much pressure on young people, but also wanting to challenge them and to push them to give them what was given to me when I was a young person, where people believed in me so much that you know I thought I could do things that just weren't possible. But because the belief of the adults made me feel like that it was possible.
Yeah, I think it's also a really conflicting idea. And also, it's like, it's very to each their own. Some people who are more social may have an easier time making connections. But yeah, I think overall, it's a very distinctive process. And just based on your own observations, now as a junior, I think I feel a lot of different types of stress about different things compared to my freshman or sophomore year. But
Yeah.
in your own observations, how do you think the mental health of students of different grades compare?
I think a place like Stuyvesant, and I think the high achieving, highly accelerated schools, I think there's a real application or applied pressure, so to speak, from the adults and from the kids themselves. I mean, I think my observations of a lot of our students at Stuyvesant are, they're really driven. They want to do well, and when you have close to 3,300 students who are all very driven, you're going to get a level of competition. You're going to get a feeling, a level of pressure. And then I think also with the adults, I mean, in families, I think um, parents want the best for their kids. And so I think sometimes that's hard for them to balance about what you all are experiencing. I think ninth grade, we used to not talk about college until junior year. And now what we hear from families, students is like, we need to start it in the ninth grade. And I think it's even starting earlier than that. And I think the challenge is for young people and families is they may be looking at a specific destination. You know, they have a certain college or university or even job they have in mind, and they're putting all of their eggs in that one basket. And I really hope students and families can see that the process is really important. And this is not to negate that destination at some point isn't important or valuable. It is. But I think it's just a different world, and there's so much pressure to get to a specific place. Um, but it may not happen instantaneously, it may take a while, and it may not even happen. But that doesn't negate the experience nor that a person is not successful. Um, and so, what I hope is throughout the 4 years that our young people find ways to enjoy the experience. I think ninth grade is, you're going through a transition. Many of our kids come from middle schools that are small, to then jumping into a school that's 10 floors, 3,300 students. So it could be overwhelming, to then finding some comfort level in your sophomore year. I think sophomore year is a little bit tougher as well, because you have higher expectations of yourself, but you may not have the skill set or to meet those expectations. And then, of course, junior year is really a tough year academically. You start to think a lot more about college, and then senior year, the fall term, is really difficult because you have a full load and you're applying to colleges. The time that I see a lot of seniors really enjoy it is their second term of their senior year. But we always try to encourage them to, make the most of it, but also continue to build that momentum that's going to carry them through the summer and through, post-secondary.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, I do realize that over the years, every year, I think the freshmen become more and more, I guess, fixated on college. Like the
Mm-hmm.
freshman workshop that we did, I remember one of them was telling me which school he wants to go to and what classes he wants to take in his senior year. So I also think it's not just like the influence of teachers, but it's also just when a lot of students realize the competition they're in and how they're no longer the smartest kids in their classes. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that
Yeah,
shortly.
no, that's a
Eric,
that's a really good
yeah.
observation.
Yeah, but Eric, you can take over.
Yeah. And speaking more of peer pressures and these pressures that apply to students, some students, when they're pressured too much, tends to make some mistakes. And in most scenarios, these mistakes lead to harm of their own. Such, I guess, as a side of the student example, such example could be mental health drug disorder usage, such as Adderall overdose. And as someone who is supposed to guide these students, could you elaborate on how you will approach to them as both personal manner and as a professional manner as the principal of Stuyvesant High School?
I mean, I think, one of the things we want, I say this all the time in our open houses. I say this it's like, we want young people to make mistakes. Like, this is the time to really learn about yourself, about the world. And I really believe this. Our job as adults is to help our young people make more good decisions than poor ones, but making decisions, first of all, and then understanding that decisions lead to certain implications, sometimes more positive than others. And so our job is to help young people navigate that, help young people process it. And it's interesting. I think I'm a more patient principal than I am a father. I think as a principal, I try to be very open and have conversations with our students, whether it's a disciplinary issue, whether it's a dishonesty issue, is to be able to have a conversation with them and to help them understand, like, you made a poor decision. What are you going to learn from it? And then how do you move forward? And I think those conversations are really important. And not that it's going to stick the first time. I think you have to constantly have that. I think, again, we often do this, and I see this in myself as a father, where, like, when my own kid makes a mistake, I'm hard on them. I have to remind myself, or try to remind myself, like, have the same conversation with them that I try to do with with the students. Unfortunately, my wife is much better at it than I am, and really helpful. But I think that's their job, is to their job being young people is to make mistakes, to learn about the decisions that they're constantly having to make each and every day. And I think it's also our job to recognize when young people make good decisions. I think we often take that for granted, that our young people show up to school every day, or they do their homework and they do their work, or they come in when they do the things that they say they're going to do, and we don't often congratulate them for that. We just take that for granted. And so then the time that we often acknowledge our young people is when they make the mistake. And so you got to find that right balance, or you got to find again, balance in trying to make sure that when you do have the conversation or you recognize or acknowledge the mistake, you also are acknowledging a lot of the great things that young people do. I think it's really difficult because I think there often feels like time is so limited, and so you're trying to get so much out of our young people in a short period of time. And so I think it's become difficult for the adults to have those conversations, and is also, I think, hard for young people to see, like, oh gosh, this one, I do one bad thing or make one poor decision, that's going to ruin me for the rest of my life, right? And it's not, right? Those things, it's hard in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not. But a young person doesn't know that because you haven't had that much life experience, and that's where I think the adults could really offer some perspective. So it's difficult, and I think this is where as we as adults can do better, is to have the conversations and to be kind about it. I think that's probably the biggest thing. It's like you can hold young people to high expectations, but oftentimes if you don't do it in a kind way, then sometimes it goes in one ear out the other, and people don't want to respond to that. Considering that cognitively and developmentally, they're also going through a lot of emotions, and so may not be able to understand it fully in the manner in which you think that they may be able to hear.
That was a great point, I think. I mean, personally, as a Stuyvesant alumni, I think that the mistakes and the experience I've had in Stuyvesant allowed me to grow more as a human and make some better decisions once I get to college. Though I would also like to talk about some virtues of challenging ourselves, I guess. So it seems like, at least from where I left off, that a lot of students they're trying to challenge themselves more and take some more harder courses or more sophisticated courses. So basically, how would you try to accommodate all these students who are more trying to challenge themselves more and more throughout their time in high school?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of ways that young people can challenge themselves besides taking the hardest courses. I mean, I think I've seen, it's interesting because we're talking about mental health, and I recall, I often hear the piece about mental health, but ironically, when we go through our program, preferences, there's never, young people aren't shy about asking for an additional advanced placement course or an additional course that is probably much harder and would give them a very expansive workload. And so I think, this was brought up about there's kind of this contradiction, so to speak, or conflicting ideas where, again, there's a lot of mental health, but you know what? I could probably use another advanced placement course. And now I have 5 or 6, and I think I can handle that. Um, and I think, again, sometimes it's about just like that idea of if I get this one more course, then it's going to make my transcript look a certain way. Um, I understand that the competition, there is competition, and certain courses perhaps may be seen differently by colleges. And so I get it. But at the same time, I think there are other ways to be challenged. I mean, again, I think if you're not, a person that socializes very often or as much, I think that's important to get yourself out there. If you think about this, oftentimes if you go, you hardly ever see anyone eat by themselves anymore. And if they do, they have their phone, right? Talking to strangers is not something that's common. I think there's a lot of ways in which we can challenge ourselves beyond just taking that additional class. It could be from, a teacher and their teaching style that you may not prefer, but again, I'm sure all of you that are at college, your professors they're going to range in a variety of, in terms of quality and in their teaching style, and you're not going to just quit their class because it's not exactly the way you want it. Um, so I think these are the conversations we have with students. I mean, I get it all the time where they want this additional class. I make them have a conversation with me, and if they do get it, then I tell them you're not going to be able to drop it. So don't come to me 2 months later and say I have a mental health issue and I want to drop it. And not saying that I'm not going to be open and receptive about it, but I'm going to challenge them because I think it's important around, again, us having the conversation. And so um, I do worry that there is this feeling that you have to continue to do more and more and more, and not finding the ways of which the doing more is actually helping you grow as a person. Um, and I think, again, I think it just takes conversations from a variety of adults, from friends. I think, we're not going to solve it instantly, but I think over time, um, if you can have conversations with young people and see that there are other ways to challenge themselves, then hopefully it will get a little bit better. Um, but again, I think it's hard at a place like Stuyvesant and other schools where you got really driven people, and again, there's specific places that they want to go, and so it's hard to convince them that you know there are other ways to challenge yourselves besides a full academic course load.
Yeah, I remember at least when I was in Sty, there's no other way to challenge myself other than going academically. Until now I'm in college and I'm basically challenging myself in all different ways. So once again, I was wrong, and what you taught us was right.
Oh,
But
I mean, you all don't know that until,
yeah,
I mean, again, I'm sure, like, trying to convince someone of something, if they can't even fully understand that, it's really difficult. And I think what was important for us is, even if you don't get it at the time, the point is you're getting it now, right? And you have to experience it. And hopefully we did enough um, to be able to help you deal with whatever comes across, confronts you when you leave us. And seems like, you and others have been able to handle it really well. So makes me happy.
thank you. Yeah, this is going very great, but I'm afraid this conversation is getting a little too inclusive to Stuyvesant students. So I'd like to
Okay,
transition into a question from non-site students. So Faith, could
got
you
it.
take over from here?
All right, sure. So, as I mentioned before, I go to a high school in Long Island, and I have some questions about STY itself as a school, because in my school, I feel that like they actively want to like brand themselves as a school that's like very open and wants you to like inviting and wants everybody to be connected with everybody and the teachers and be comfortable in the school. So, do you think that in STY, you guys foster an environment where students are comfortable and reaching out and connecting with other administrators?
My hope and goal is that we are all kind to one another. And, I don't want to confuse kindness with, you know, um, always liking or even getting along with everyone. I mean, we should be very real about that. I mean, we're a big community. We have a variety of people with different ideas, values. The goal is that everyone, who is a part of the Stuyvesant community, um, is welcome and belongs. Um, but we're a microcosm of the world around us. I mean, we're going to have differences, and we have to figure out how to coexist. Um, I want young people to, and I want everyone to be comfortable, but I also don't want to shy away from discomfort. I think if we are just wanting everyone to feel good all the time and comfortable, then we're not preparing you for what you're going to be facing outside of the school or after school. Um, I had this saying when in my first school, I wrote some of the values that I wanted to see, and I wrote this comfortable discomfort, meaning that you had to feel comfortable and confident enough about who you are and who you're becoming to express yourself in some form or fashion. But at the same time, we wanted to create levels of discomfort so that you can see what else is possible. And I think sometimes we can get more from ourselves when we are put in a position where we're going to have to do things differently, or we're going to have to do more. Um, so I'm not all about, hey, we're all kumbaya, and there's not going to be conflict or discomfort. I think that's a wrong message. I think we need to help young people deal with that. Um, and deal with it uh, in a civil manner and a professional manner. So I think those are all really important. We welcome any and everyone in the school community, and I want different ideas, and I want us to be able to hear and retort and listen. Um, but I don't expect us all to be the same. I don't expect all of us to agree with one another, but I do expect us to coexist. And so we want to find ways that young people can do that. I think, unfortunately, what I've seen, I think the past few years, folks have become really good at calling people out, and I'm not just saying at Stuyvesant. I think just in general, it's like pinpointing what people do wrong and their mistakes, but it's hard to go anywhere from that. Like, where's the forgiveness? Where's the dialogue in which, okay, people make mistakes? And I was talking about this before. If we're not allowed to make mistakes and then be able to find ways to move forward, then we're just going to continue to find fault in everything that people do. And then people are going to continue to be scared to make mistakes, because then all that's going to happen is they're going to get called out. I think schools have to be environments in which we create conditions that allow young people to find their voice, to find levels of comfort, to find levels of discomfort. And then how do you navigate that? So, I mean, I appreciate your school doing what it's doing, and all schools trying to create that. But I do believe strongly in particularly at Stuyvesant, it's like, I don't want everyone to be comfortable 100% of the time. I want them to feel welcomed 100% of the time, but I want them to experience what they're going to experience in the real world, which is high levels of discomfort, conflict, tension, and us being able to deal with it in a mature, civil way, so that we can all continue to move forward and hopefully grow as a community.
Yeah, that sounds really great. I really like the idea of comfort yet discomfort as well. It's like a very overlooked idea. And kind of to go into reflections and to learn about your personal opinions on your job and um, everything that you really learned from your career thus far, I'll hand it over to Chloe to begin.
So like I mentioned before, I'm also a junior at a high school in Long Island. And earlier we heard a lot about your career, so it's easy to see how passionate you are as an educator. So can you tell us more about what your motivations are as the principal of Stuyvesant?
Yeah, I was fortunate when my first time as a principal. I worked with some incredible young people and staff, um, and the young people we worked with, these weren't the highest test takers, and not all being the highest achievers. And so a lot of the work was getting young people just to the finish line to graduate. Um, and I think it was an incredible experience because it took so much effort, so much energy and conversations to help young people try to overcome some of their circumstances, that a lot of it didn't even have to do with school. And so I learned a lot about young people and what they face. And then I left the principalship, worked at the district office for about 3 years, and then decided I wanted to go back into the schools. And I wanted to go back into a school that was, one, a large school, and then two, that worked with accelerated students, because I wanted to see what value adults could offer there. And I think with Stuyvesant, our job as adults is to add value to their experience, and that's really been an important piece for me, is that we want to continue to allow young people to pursue the things that they're really interested in. We want them to learn about what skills or strengths that they have or talents that they have, and to try to explore them. And even the things that they don't like, because I think sometimes you find out a lot about yourself by the things that you don't like or prefer. Um, and so I think I've been really fortunate that we have a school that not only the students and the staff and the families are highly motivated. So I don't have to motivate most people in this community like ours. I think what we have to do is create those conditions that allow us to make sure that we can um, maintain perspective. So again, recognizing that we do work with very talented young people, and that just because they may not get to a specific destination or a specific outcome doesn't mean that they're not successful, or that their life is not going to end in in a way that again is not deemed successful at all. And I think it's been one of which where the more and more you talk to young people, the more I've had exposure to young people at Stuyvesant, it's just like, wow. I mean, our kids are so brilliant and so talented and driven. Um, and the only thing that they don't have is experience and oftentimes perspective. And I think that's really our job as adults, is to offer that insight, with the hope that they'll listen and see that what we're offering, um, I think, is really important for them to kind of put in perspective all the things that they've been able to accomplish in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I know that Sty has one of the largest student populations that I know of, like in high school. So it's really inspiring to hear that you have this desire to help all of them individually. So continuing on, I wanted to point out how the Korean community places a high importance on education, but few actually enter the education workforce. So to talk more about your Korean American identity, what do you feel is expected of you as a Korean American leader in education?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting. Again, I think Asian Americans in general, and probably even Korean Americans, there's such low numbers of us in the education field, and in particular, some of the system level positions, such as superintendents and such. And I think, um, again, the value that Korean culture or Korean American culture has on education is somewhat ironic. Then that more folks aren't going into the field. I think for me, it is about all young people, regardless of whether you're Korean American or other ethnicity. But again, I think it's as a Korean American, um, I'm very cognizant of the possible influence that I can have. And I've had conversations with a variety of students, including many of our Korean Americans, about kind of things that they experience culturally, the things that they experience, expectations they experience at home. I think where I can be very valuable, or I think I can add value, is my conversations with the parents. I think, again, I understand what it feels like and felt like having really high expectations and the importance of education, and feeling as if like all the pride of our family resides on what we do as professionals. And so I think sometimes having those conversations with the families about how brilliant and incredible their young person is, um, I think has been fairly influential. And then to give, I think the students some perspective as well, where um, again, I shared that story at the very beginning where I didn't get accepted initially, and I've had a lot of setbacks. I try to share them with our students because um, I think sometimes most of what we see in this world and day and age now is the glossed, polished end. You don't see all the things that led to where you fully are. So, like, even the introduction, which was a really lovely introduction, I'm seen as the side principal, and no one introduces me as, well, he didn't initially get accepted to teachers college, he didn't get accepted to law school, or any of the things like that, right? But those are all the experiences that have led me to where I am, and I think we have to help our students see that your path is typically and most likely not going to be this very smooth ride. And I think when you see and hear people that have been successful, um, we often focus on the polished end result as opposed to everything that they've experienced, everything that they've endured, and sharing that, because I think again that sometimes gets lost. But I think it's so important because I do believe representation matters. I think it is helpful that I am a Korean American male, in the education field, particularly since the education field is predominantly female. Um, and again, there aren't as many Asian American administrators and superintendents, and so I think again there's opportunities to have greater influence, and so I'm very cognizant of the privilege and role that I have, and my hope is that I'll be a role model for others, and particularly many of our Asian American, Korean American young people who I hope will also enter education, because I think they could offer a lot of perspective and insights to future generations.
So I think we covered a lot of ground, from education to mental health to the idea of identity, at least in the academic setting. And I want to bring it all together and ask, I think this has been really valuable for me too. I went to a high pressure high school as well, although it has been some time since I graduated. And I think it would have been really nice to hear from my own principal. Not that I really sought it out, but I think at the time I was going through maybe what many of the people here were going through. Um, the school that I went to, in name, it was very prestigious, and
Mm-hmm.
now I can admit that it wasn't the right school for me. I struggled a lot, but I do appreciate everything that I was able to learn from that space. And I think after graduating school, it's made me realize that there's a level of stability that school offers that maybe is harder to find after you leave that academic environment. Um, and there isn't like a set path for you to follow. Um, and I was wondering, as an adult, maybe like balancing your role as an educator, principal, parent, all that together, how do you find like spaces of belonging and stability for yourself? I know you talked a little bit about how important it is to have moments to decompress and reflect. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you do that yourself. Um, yeah.
That's a great question, and I will be as honest as I can be. I think I struggle with that quite a bit. Um, I think one of the ways that I've been able to do that, I wake up really early, around 4 o'clock, and so from like 4 to about 6 o'clock in the morning is often at times where I just can read or write or drink a nice cup of coffee, and spend some time just thinking. Um, and thinking in a way that's not constantly about work or all the just like thinking as a human being. And I've been that has been in one way my outlet and my savior, because I think you know uh, I don't know. I remember my parents used to wake up really early. I never understood how they did that, and now I understand because I do that. But it's the space that I think you need, and I think as I said before, and I use this quite a bit, perspective. I mean, I love being a father. I have an incredible wife and two lovely daughters. Um, and so when things are really stressful and high pressured, I think, I come home, they smile, they'll laugh, they'll go through all the emotions, but their dad and husband, and so that gives me perspective. And I think you have to, realize, like, at the end of the day, there all the things that can go wrong if you have some people in your life that you really um, are meaningful or and important to you, then you have that. And um, I think this is more and more like I see that. And because the job itself at Stuyvesant's there's a lot of pressure, and I think there's lots of pressure in so many different jobs now that you got to find ways to find that balance or some level of decompression. And also, I think the last thing is to be forgiving of yourself. I'm not great at that. I often like get down and like hard on myself. Um, but I think one of the things I've tried to do is show appreciation. I write letters to like the staff or even to kids, just like, thank you for doing this thing that I saw you do, or for, extending it forward, of showing goodwill or kindness to someone. And, when I do that, I often feel really good or better, because it just puts into perspective all the things that, we're trying to do as people.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a really good note to end on, the idea of paying it forward. I think in many ways we're all very fortunate to have this space as well to discuss. Um, this podcast actually started meeting, I want to say, I think as a full group, it hasn't been too long, but it's been developing for a long time. And I think we're all extremely happy that you are our first guest, and to have talked to you and get your perspective has been really valuable so far. And I think before we end, we just wanted to ask if you have any closing remarks.
Yeah, I appreciate. Well, one, thank you very much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun, and I think there's so much to offer in respects to teaching people, but we often forget how much we're learning. And one, I just appreciate that you all started this and have done this, because it takes time. Someone, I think, I can't remember if it was Hannah or maybe even you said it. It was like, oh, it's a Saturday. Thank you for taking the time. But that means it's your Saturday as well. And so you are doing something, I believe, that's really worthwhile and going to share this with the world. And again, I think one of the biggest things is to actually do it. Like we often ponder it, we talk about it, but we never take action. And you all are doing this, and I hope you take some pride and feel very accomplished about actually even talking about it and putting it through and sharing it with the world. So one, just really appreciative of the opportunity. I'm delighted to hear and see how you all are kind of navigating this world, and knowing that we got some really great role models. My daughters are 9 and 11, and so it makes me proud to know that they're going to have role models in you all, and you know helping them become better people. So thank you for that, and I've really enjoyed today.
Yeah, perfect. So that concludes our mental health awareness interview. Thank you so much for joining us. We really believe that your words can inspire many students, especially of the Asian community. So for more information about the initiative behind this podcast, please visit koreanhealth.org and feel free to give us feedback via email. We look forward to meeting you all in the next episode. Thank you.